Hey, what's up, Heavy Metallurgy? It's Logan, the Metal and Beer Snob, and tonight I am your Stoner Doom correspondent, and I've got what is, in my opinion, a standout album for that genre for 2025. So you don't want to miss out on this discussion. So join me for a voyage into Cosmic Reaper's second album, Bleed the Wicked, Drown the Damned. So as I said, this is Cosmic Reaper's sophomore effort, which comes out September 26th via Heavy Psych Sounds. And I know they're at least pressing a record and hopefully a CD version of this for now. As this band is still on the up and up, and this is only their second album, before we move on into the music itself, I think a proper backstory and introduction is needed. So without further ado, a cat. Cosmic Reaper formed in Charlotte, North Carolina back in 2017 as, of course, just a straight up stoner doom band. I felt like back then they were very much focused on honing that sleep oriented sound, and you can definitely see this on their debut EP, which was released in 2019. This is Demon Dance. 4 songs, just shy of 20 minutes. A great introduction, but, nothing earth-shattering for the genre. And then relatively soon after that, in 2021, they followed it up with their debut self-titled album, and this was also released on Heavy Psych Sounds. So their self-titled album very much stays in the same lane that Demon Dance kind of opened up, and it definitely expands it well to make it worth a full length, but you're not necessarily getting anything you wouldn't expect. Except I will say the atmosphere is top-notch and definitely lends to the band's name, Cosmic Reaper. There's some reefer you could smoke and it would feel like drifting off into space, especially on tracks like Wasteland and Planet Eater. One more release I kind of want to note. In 2023, they were a part of the Doom Session series that Heavy Psych Sounds so excellently puts out from time to time. This is volume 7 where they split it with In Time, and the track Sundowner especially is a phenomenal one and kind of hints at better songwriting overall, more unique songwriting. And so now here we are, it's fall of 2025 with album number 2. And before we dive any further, if you can't tell by the shirt and the previous albums they've released, I am indeed a fan of these guys. I, of course, spent just over half a decade in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm from North Carolina originally. So I've basically been following these guys since Demon Dance came out on the scene and have had the pleasure of seeing them live. They're a phenomenal live band. Astronomically heavy. You're basically just headbanging the whole time. It's been a treat kind of following their career as they got signed to Heavy Psych Sounds and are about to push out their second release via that label. And needless to say, I was waiting with bated breath to see if Cosmic Reaper could potentially find their own sound. So I definitely had a fair amount of excitement going into this album's release. And on first impression, I gotta say, I was not disappointed at all. Bleed the Wicked, Drown the Damned has just some of those immediately recognizable and memorable songs that Cosmic Reaper was starting to hint at with Sundowner off of this split, and the better tracks off of here. They've kind of learned how to take that just stoner doom frame, make it so we're writing a song, we're not just playing a sound, but the verses are recognizable, the choruses are hooky and big, and we're going to get stuck in your head for days. And of course, most importantly, the riffs are fucking heavy and honestly unique from song to song. I was immediately impressed and knew I wanted to talk about this album and this band overall, if you can't tell. So before I go any further, let me quickly touch on the lineup that plays on Bleed the Wicked, Drown the Damned. So there are a 4-piece on here, and There's 3 original members. We've got Thad Collins on guitars and vocals, Jeremy Grobsmith on drums, and Garrett Garlington on bass. And on this album, they're joined by lead guitarist Pete Snasdell. Interesting note about Pete over here, he actually is from the UK doom scene and is kind of a veteran doom guitarist. His most famous accolade was he was a member of the death doom band Decomposed and played on a fairly well-known album in my opinion, Hope Finally Died, which came out in 1993. So there's an odd connection I bet you didn't think you'd make in this video. The UK death doom scene to the Charlotte, North Carolina stoner doom scene, and it's like over 30 years apart. Metal's pretty cool. So to kind of talk about their influences just a little bit more, I think when describing stoner doom, you kind of always have to start with Sleep, and of course Black Sabbath, which, you know, there are Black Sabbath riffs here a little bit. Their influences go a little bit deeper, and like kind of the bands that you might think of are a bit more interesting than just saying, oh, it's, you know, Sleep's Holy Mountain over and over again. I think they do a good job of echoing the sound that some of their contemporaries kind of created around the 2000s and 2010s. From my perspective, there's a more of a focus on atmosphere along with the riff writing and kind of trying to create an emotional feel from the music that I think a lot of stoner doom bands don't really try to do, and that makes a big difference with how these songs hit and how this album hits overall. For me, it conjures some of my favorites of this style. I think Windhand on some of these songs. I also hear Pallbearer on the final track, which I'll get into more. And even Warning kind of in like the vocal melodies and the lines that some of the guitars do. There's like this somber, sad feeling that kind of comes from some of this music, which just really hits. It hits a lot more than the same Potleaf anthem or This Is the Mighty Lizard Wizard for the 50th time. So no, I do think with these specific influences and the background and more unique cosmic-oriented sound that they've set up on Cosmic Reaper, this band is set to create like their own sound for Bleed the Wicked, Drown the Damned, and I feel like they do. It does feel like emotionally charged music, and for stoner doom, it actually sounds quite urgent. Like these are not songs that are just meandering. They feel like they have purpose all the way through. That's a rare feat and an impressive one to accomplish. Of course, one of the highlights still are the guitar performances by Thad and Pete. Just the main riff writing, as I mentioned before, is phenomenal. Really, not only are the riffs good, but the band really does a good job of coming together behind it to create these epic moments. Other than that, the lead work by Pete is phenomenal, and it's subtle enough that you don't necessarily get it the first time you listen to it. Of course, there are some like obvious leads that come in like right after a chorus on one song or, you know, right in the beginning, but there's some cool atmospheric touches that he puts into some of the intros and outros of tracks, and he just makes it a bit more of a colorful listen with his, you know, I would call it inventive lead work. And then, of course, the rhythm section pummel you. And they do a great job of keeping lockstep time and keeping the album moving forward while adding some little tricks in there at the same time to really, you know, make you scratch your head and be like, wow, I'm surprised they're doing that on a Stoner Doom album. But no, I can't get over how emotionally impactful this album is. There are tracks on here that feel somber and depressive, and then others that feel downright vitriolic and just pissed off. Like, I think they're really doing a good job of channeling the mood of 2025. It's, you know, no matter who you are, it's been an interesting year for sure, and I think Bleed the Wicked, Drown the Damned has some anthems for you. Which, speaking of these anthems, man, let's dive into this track list, because I've been waiting. Opening track, Hammer. Great opener. Not necessarily one of my favorites, but I like it because it does the job of being the opener well. It checks off all the boxes of being a great stoner doom track while still having some phenomenal lead work that I was alluding to earlier. The album then really starts to pick up with track 2, Bloodfeather. This is when the songwriting just amps up, and it has this almost wind hand kind of feel to it, where it's a little bit swirling, and the way it builds to the chorus. And goddamn, this chorus is catchy.
It's time to fly. The oracle sings. Ascend the sky. Let us break.
But from the excellent songwriting of Bloodfeather, we get to one of my other favorite styles that is on this album. Just that kind of pissed off, almost punk feeling track. That, as I said, it carries a bit of vitriol. Track 4, Parasites, is another highlight for me. And vocalist Thad is still kind of singing in that somewhat harmonious way, but it does sound like he's on the edge of shouting and even screaming at times with the chorus, just calling out parasites, feeding on greed and gluttony. It's a great song and a great moment for just more of an angst-filled part of the album.
You are nothing but weeds, like crawling bacteria you breathe. Bringers of suffering.
And then the follow-up track 5 is such a weird shift in vibe. It is almost like an interlude track, but it covers so much more ground than any interlude should. And it's almost 3 minutes, so I'm calling it its actual song. It's basically the midway point and like kind of a pause before the final movement of the album. And it does such a great job of letting the listener breathe. Very quiet, calm guitar playing, and the drums the whole time are just playing like a really cool snare roll. And it's just like calming and psychedelic, and then as you're just kind of drifting off into this ocean, the drummer, he just starts doing a double bass pattern. And it sounds cool as hell, but they never drop a full stoner doom kind of heavy riff in there. It's just all very spaced out and dreamy, and we get some vocals in here as well. But I don't know, a really cool highlight for this album, and probably one of the first tracks that caught my attention, cueing me that this is a step up from other stoner doom bands I've heard this year. And then I got to highlight track 6, Perfect Organism. We're kind of back to more of a romper in the stoner doom style. And this one, we're talking about sci-fi. Let me guess if you can tell what alien we're talking about. In space, only Cosmic Reaper can hear you scream. Any song that references the perfect organism that is Alien, I'm there. So, cheers, guys. And then track 7, Bones. It is my favorite song on the album, and potentially one of my favorite tracks of the year, if not my favorite song of the year I've heard. With this song, they basically created an anthem. I mean, it opens with this mosh riff, and it gives me chills every time I hear it. I didn't know a stoner doom band could create something I would so avidly want to mosh to. Like, Cosmic Reaper, come down to New Orleans. I'll open up the pit for you. The way that the riff matches and interacts with the drum work is really what brings this bouncy feel to it. Just want to bang your head and, run into the wall or something. And then you get to the chorus and it's just a full-blown earworm. Man, the chills come back and it just gets better and better. I mean, like, is the line, like the hook for the chorus, and we're kind of back to a really pissed off sounding lyric. The bones you collect will haunt you till you join them in the end. And I didn't deliver that line as good as Thad does in the chorus, so please check it out. It's one of the singles. You should be able to find it pretty easily. This album is worth the price of admission alone for this song.
But remember the bones you collect will haunt you till you join them.
And then Waiting by the Gallows closes it out beautifully. This is the most somber and sad sounding track, maybe outside of Dwelling, but it's also the longest at just over 7 minutes. This is when the pallbearisms and even Warning or 40 Watt Sun kind of sneaks into the sound. The guitar melodies, they're just oozing this saddening feel. The verses do still sound uplifting, but then when we get to the chorus, it just drops into just a dreary dirge for mankind. And it leaves the album on a sad note, and you're wondering, are we gonna make it? This album only wraps up at 43 minutes, which for a stoner doom band, that's keeping it a little on the short side. And honestly, I appreciate it. 8 songs, 43 minutes. That's doable on any commute. So there we go. In my opinion, the Charlotte Boys have done it. They've crafted an album that I think perfectly represents stoner doom in 2025. I mean, it shows to me that this is an exciting genre to stay in touch with, and a reason why it's one of my favorite styles of music. And not only have they paid tribute to the, classic bands in this style, but I think they've crafted their own sound that I haven't really heard on other albums. I mean, the roots of Sleep and Sabbath are there, but it sounds modern, energetic, and emotive enough to reach new heights, and still, most importantly, stay very fucking heavy. If you're a fan of stoner doom, or you're just trying to keep an eye out on amazing albums from this year, this is a must check. I highly recommend Cosmic Reapers, Bleed the Wicked, Drown the Damned. And now, a call to arms. So all the emotion of that Cosmic Reaper took it out of me. So we're going for a far less serious affair with Bog Wizard and their new album Satanik Panic. So Bog Wizard are a 3-piece stoner, doom, sludge, get the whole umbrella in there, band from Western Michigan. And believe it or not, this is their 8th album since 2018, so not even a decade. These guys are prolific, and that's awesome. Of the 8, I've actually only ever heard, I guess, their 3rd release, From the Mire. The album cover is pretty sick and definitely caught my eye back when it came out in 2020. I said for their 8th album, this is Satanik Panic, which comes out October 31st. And they are independently releasing it, so I would definitely keep an eye on their Bandcamp. These guys love what they do, and they love what they're performing and writing songs about. They say that their big influences are like tabletop games, of course, like Dungeons and Dragons, but there's definitely a lot of fantasy and literature on here as well. The opening track is The Dead Marshes, so Lord of the Rings right out the gate. I am happy. And then we get an ode to all things 80s with, of course, the title track, Satanik Panic. And then weird closer, an odd nod back to my childhood. There's a cover of a song called Toxic Love, which was originally performed by Tim Curry for the movie Fern Gully. If you guys have never heard of that movie, it's basically a Save the Planet conservation film from the 90s with Tim Curry as the big bad smog monster and Robin Williams plays a bat. Classic part of my childhood. I never thought for a million years that a stoner doom band would snatch that up for one of their albums, but boys, I appreciate it. Their influences, though, overall are right up my alley. Of course, you got the classic Sabbath, but I think they're playing a little bit more with a Melvins kind of vibe, especially the amount of sound and distortion that their guitars are making. and the vocalist. He's got this King Buzzo eccentricity about his performance that I really like on some of the tracks, and sometimes he'll even amp up the performance to like the sludge bark and black metal scream at times, and it's cool. At the same time, I can tell these guys are a fan of just classic 80s doom too, because we get some, classic Dio Sabbath kind of vibes at times, and some Candlemass mood pieces as well. If you're still looking for something in the stoner doom category, even after that Cosmic Reaper, please check out Bog Wizard and Satanik Panic.
I'm coming through the darkness. Melody free. My evil forces are in your house. You're getting corrupted.
And with that, I've done my job as the Stoner Doom correspondent. You've got 2 albums to look into and slowly fade off into the ether. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, man. Heavy Metallurgy is always busy. Of course, Marty and Alan do streams every Friday night with various awesome guests, and I'm a part of the Heavy Metallurgy album club that meets every Wednesday with Marty, Kellen from Killing for Company, and Jim of Iowa's Recordings. And then, of course, there's always awesome reviews coming out. So, like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned. Cheers.
Say